Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sustainable Innovation for Interiors. I'm Silvia from DforDesign, interior design and content creation studio with a focus on biophilic design and sustainability in the interior design industry. In this series, we are meeting designers that are developing new solutions for sustainable interiors. And in this episode, we are meeting Rashmi Bidasaria from India. So let's welcome Rashmi.
Hi, Silvia. Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Rashmi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Okay, so I would say we can start with maybe a little introduction about you as a designer and your fields of work.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So I finished my master's at the Royal College of Art last year, sometime in June. And since then, I've been in India, back home, and developing my project Dross. I think this project came out because of the COVID-19 crisis, and it has been because of the crisis. So I think it's an exciting time to talk about it also. Yeah, that's me, and that's about my project.
Okay, so next question would be more of a general one because sustainability is such a wide topic, and I always like to ask, what does the word sustainability mean to you personally?
I think it is about the resources that's around us and realizing the value of these resources, because I think there's a lot of things that we see that go unnoticed, and a lot of materials are masked into one another. So I feel like having the knowledge of these materials and being able to utilize these materials is sustainability to me.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so let's now talk about your project, Dross, which is an
Yeah.
interesting way to recover both energy and materials from the steel processing industry and turning
Yeah.
them into furniture. So
Yeah.
maybe you can talk us through the process a little bit and the project in general.
Yeah, so I'll begin with just giving you a basic introduction about the project and the context which it's based in. So, as soon as the pandemic hit, I had to come back to India and be with family, and it was honestly such a good thing because I was grounded here in India and with the people that I love. And so, I was grounded in a way that I wanted to just be here and do my master's from home. And while the master's course was still going on, it was my major project. So I think I needed to still keep making and still keep learning from that making. So I started to look around the place that I was in. And this factory, the steel factory, is run by my family. And I started to look around the waste material that the factory produces. And only after coming back from London after all of these years, I realized that this was such a huge resource that I hadn't really looked at as a resource in terms of doing something with it. So I started doing a set of tests and experiments with this material called steel slag. And that's when I thought that this is something that can be actually innovated with and be used to do something more, because it feels like that there is a lot of potential with the material, but the market hasn't really tapped into it yet. I can share my presentation if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so I'll share my presentation now. So Dross, I think I would begin with the two materials that we started with. So quartz powder and steel slag. So steel slag is the material that comes out of melting steel waste, and quartz powder is the material that comes out of the furnace of the steel factory. So the steel furnace where you melt the metal, that's the waste material that comes out from there. So that's quartz powder. So what I started doing was figuring out ways in which that I could use these two materials to use the same process that the factory workers are used to, and seeing if there is a way to innovate with the same thing. So what I started was, and you'll see this in the illustration, was to go around the factory, look for scrap, weld the scrap together, put this material in, and then put this in the kiln. And the kiln was the way that the residual heat was using to bind the material. And that's how I got the basic, the furniture that you've seen. That was the initial process of this project. So you'll see here there's bits of metal bowls and pieces and bars and angles that you can see. So these are things that I had found in the scrap yard of the factory and
Amazing.
welded them together. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's, every day there's different kinds of waste that comes into the factory. So what I do is go on a foraging hunt and then weld these materials that I find together or put them two together and then use them as molds. So I don't even create new molds to make the furniture or the products that I'm making.
That's amazing.
And I realized that the furnace of the factory, there's a lot of residual heat, about 900 degrees Celsius. So I thought that that could be also another source of resource again, which we haven't really tapped into. So that was used to bake the materials, and even today I can still say that I still use that residual heat to bake everything that I'm making. So there is no new energy being produced for the materials.
Wow.
So yeah, this is the first set of prototypes that I had begun with, and it was a bit of an ambitious one because I started with big pieces, and like I wanted to do for my masters, I wanted to do something that was um, a big furniture statement because I thought that that would be really communicative to the audience.
It is.
And then I started with smaller things and smaller sculptural elements and developing how the Indian aesthetic or things that I found in the scrapyard would be taken into consideration to design these things.
Okay. So still, again, these pieces are all done with the same material.
Yeah, yeah. So the white one that you see, that's quartz, and the black one is steel slag.
Wow. And the black cap on top is steel again.
So the this thing on top is just metal that I found in the scrapyard, and I've just painted it over.
Wow. So it's 100% scraps.
One
That's
hundred
really,
percent scrap. Yes.
that's gorgeous.
So I've conceptualized them into smaller houseware items that can be used for a user, because what I realized with the furniture was that yes, it works and it could be nice in a home, but also there could be smaller things and articles that people can start incorporating in their homes to get familiar with the concept, get familiar with the material, and it's an easy way for the commercial industry to accept something new like this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are a couple of experiments.
Thanks.
And then I started experimenting with tiles and blocks and how I could use playful patterns on tabletops or even things like chessboard or a game tabletop to use on this material, because it has a nice duality of color, white and black. It's quite simple like that. So that was that. And this, I think, would be what I did until December, I think. And since then, I've been developing something really different on the same journey, because I think that this aesthetic is great and I really like it. But for a user to accept it, it needs to be slightly more refined. So I started working with a new finish that would bind the entire material and make it, smoother and softer.
Okay.
So it's a bit like terrazzo, I would say, because you can see those elements very similar to that. But these are the same things that you've seen in the previous photos, now upgraded to something more, refined.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, and
they're beautiful. I mean, they have a slightly different. One is more like ancestral kind of aesthetic, but they are both beautiful. I mean, yeah. But as you
yeah,
say, there's different customers, and so it might be an
yeah.
idea to have both options.
Yeah, and so I've just kind of put them in a placement right now to see how playful this can be and how it could be conceptualized into a home.
Yeah.
So you can see the grains of the stone and the quartz material and even the slag that is in the thing much more clearly in this.
It's very rich texture. Yeah. And then you polish it at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah,
Is it?
I do polish it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's about it for
Great.
the. I'll
Um,
stop. I'll stop the screen share for the presentation.
okay.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, as I was seeing on your website, that's a really exciting process.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
are these, just one curiosity, are these scrap materials, the steel slag and the quartz powder, are they normally reused in other ways, or they normally just go to landfill?
So the quartz has definitely gone into landfill, and the company has to spend more money to push that into landfill. So that's definitely a waste material. But this steel slag does have a couple of applications. It's used as a replacement for regular river sand in construction blocks or bricks, but the demand for that is quite low at the moment.
Okay.
It could be because of the color, because it's black, and it could recolor the brick or different things like that. So there's a lot of apprehension around this kind of slag. There are a couple of steel factories that do produce white color steel slag, and that's more accepted.
Okay.
So because it doesn't decolor the brick or whatever product it's creating. So that's why this one is sort of left out.
Yeah, yeah, but that's a great application. I mean, what was my next question? Oh, yeah. Um, in this project, you've been working really, as you said, just taking what you had around you, and so really relying on whatever you could find. And so I guess that also some of the design decisions, like the shapes, as you said, are actually coming along the way according to what you can find in the scraps. So I
Yeah.
was wondering, how did it feel to work with such a boundary? Did it feel like a limitation at all, or was it more like a stimulus? Were you used to work this way?
I think it's a really good question because it goes back to kind of what I would like to do in my practice overall is just use the kind of resources that's around us. So there is a very common principle that Indians follow, and it's called jugaad, and that is the meaning of that is to just make do with the resources around you and in an innovative way. So I don't think it felt like a limitation because actually it was the opposite for me. I felt like, oh, this is here. It's easy. I don't have to think so much about it. It's right there in front of me. I don't have to do much. Just weld a couple of joints and it's ready. I don't have to design a whole new aesthetic. It's a bit lazy for me, I think, but it works because
No, I mean it's also interesting that it's part of your culture, because I didn't know. I mean, it's because we
yeah,
are seeing it as a development of in the design world in
yeah,
general. But of course, if it's part of culture, it's
yeah.
even stronger, as
Yeah, I
a
think it's the first step that I think we would all take as to see like, okay, we need something. It's right here. Why don't we put two and two together and see if it works?
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's something very, very innate and culturally based, I think I would say.
Yeah, that's amazing. Another important and interesting actually side of your project, when I was looking around on your website, I saw that you mentioned that of course you've been relying a lot on the skills of the steel workers, that of course are the
Yeah.
ones that have all the skills about the material, the processes, etc. And again, I was wondering, how did they welcome a concept of reusing their waste? Where they, I mean, how did it go?
It was challenging at first because I was
Okay.
trying to do something that they didn't see before or they weren't used to before.
Okay.
Because when I told them that I want to do something with it, they were like, "This is waste. We don't do anything with waste. It's
Exactly.
thrown away." So it was challenging at first. I would say that for sure. But when I got the first prototype out, and when they saw that there could be something that you can like this cup, right, this bowl, so it looks like something you could put in your home, and the first prototype looked something like you could put in your home. So that was when the trust was established, I would say.
Okay.
And from then on it was kind of a collaboration in a way that they would tell me like, hey, why don't you try this, and this is the way that we use the material, and this is the way that we know the processes. Why don't you try this and put that into your process and see if something can work out, so it became a very mutual kind of understanding, and it was a good one because I definitely didn't have the knowledge of the material as much as they did because they work with them day and night, right? So I think the also other advantage was with this project that it could be a way of revenue generation for them as well, because the factory workers, they live in the factory and they have a community in the factory.
Okay.
So, and that's a very general thing that happens in Indian factories. A lot of Indian factories house their laborers. So it could be a way that they own this process for themselves once it's set up and in a way that it's working completely. They have the access to the techniques, they have the access to materials. All they have to do is weld a mold and do it.
Yeah.
So it would be a way, like if they broke a tile in their home, they could replace that tile with this.
Yeah, of
Something
course.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the tables that you saw that in the presentation, they're in their community space right now, so
Oh,
they can
no,
use
that's
that.
cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's cool. Oh, it's
Yeah.
great to see also, I mean, as you say, that the relationship has evolved, from the beginning where they were a little, what are you doing with our waste? And then it turned into trust is really, it's also comforting regarding,
Yeah.
the situation we are in, where a lot of people, of course, are not quite used to reusing waste. But then
Yeah.
as you did actually, when you lead by example and you show what's possible, then it's
Yeah.
right. It's enough to convince people. So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So you'll see the person who was in the presentation, who was with the furniture.
Yeah.
He is one of the laborers that works in the factory, and he was super excited that one of the days that we'd finished all of the products, he wanted to be in the pictures. So when we were shooting, he was very excited, and he was like, "Can I pose with him and with them, and can I do this?" And it was a really really satisfying moment at that point, because it felt like they had accepted it to a certain extent.
Yeah, like the end of a journey.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it must have felt fantastic for you. Yeah, and for them
Yeah.
too. They must have been like
Yeah.
blown away by what you were doing with their waste.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question would be more of a practical one, because of course this was born as an experimental project. But do
Yeah.
you have any plans to put it into the market somehow, or make the production scalable so that it can go into the market, or not?
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking at putting this into the commercial market, because the finishes that you've seen before and now, I think that's definitely a step ahead for the past few months that I've been working on getting it into the market. And it's, much smoother. I actually have it right here. It's like softer and nicer, and there's no residue coming out. So it's also welcoming in a way that it makes you feel a little pleased. So that's definitely a step ahead. About scalability of the shapes and models that come out of this process, I think at this point I still see it as a one-off piece that comes out of it, because the molds that I have to create for this are quite difficult, because I need clamps and things that are easily removable. So in that takes a lot of manufacturing effort, and so those things, if there is a certain system and if there is a certain requirement, then it makes financial sense to kind of create those molds and get similar type. But if people are really happy with what comes out of the scrap, and it's kind of like telling the story of one sort of waste merging with another sort of waste and coming out to you and your home, so I think that's also a journey in itself.
Because normally, in right now you are making the molds and then you are disassembling them.
No, so the molds that are there, after some time, you can't use them, because they get kind of the material gets stuck in it, and it has to be kind of cleaned or like cut out to kind of open the material again. So then once it's not used, it goes back into the factory furnace and gets melted into steel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
So
not a waste. That's
no, it's not waste still. It just is not usable for the material anymore.
yeah, exactly. So you take
Yeah.
it and then you recycle it in something
Yeah.
else. That's
Yeah. It goes back into the process that it was earlier meant for anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
it's just a fresher model has to be made for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Yeah, I just love this project. It's so amazing. I was going to ask how COVID has changed your plans, but actually that's the whole presentation is part of it. So this project was born because of COVID, because you came
Yeah.
back here.
I did. That was one of the main reasons, but also because during the lockdown, I only had access to the factory,
Yeah.
and there was nothing else I could use. No CNC machines, no carpentry machines, no whatever was in the factory, right? So I couldn't go to a metal worker and say like, "Hey, I need to make this mold. Can you make this for me?" It was just the one pipe that I had, the one bolt that I had. So these kind of things came together as one, and I thought that this works. It just doesn't need an external force for anything. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't need another kiln that's controlled with temperature. I don't need any of those things because the method that we developed was whatever heat we have in the factory, we work with that heat and then we make the product based on that.
That's amazing because it's really such a great, you know, yeah, demonstration that really whatever you have and whatever situation you are, even though it feels a super limitation with respect to what you're used to, you can come out with gorgeous projects. You know, that's amazing. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so okay, my next question would be a general one again,
Yeah.
because you know in the world where we are in desperate need of sustainable development in all fields. And
Yeah.
from your perspective, in the design field, what would speed the change?
I think it's not the design field that needs to change in a way, because I feel like there's a lot of people working in this sphere. I think what we need to do is to educate the customer and educate people who are going to receive these things, because it still feels like a luxury to have sustainable materials at home. And I think that's the kind of step or change that we need to make in our production techniques to make it affordable for a client, for a user to accept these things and still be a part of the change, because I don't think it's just one thing that needs to change, especially in the design community.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, actually, I also feel that, you know, with sustainability, there are the two extremes. Either, as you say, it's seen as a luxury, or it's seen more like a DIY, whatever, with what you find, and so not
Yeah,
really appealing. But that's the
yeah,
middle thing that's missing. And as you say, we, you know, in the community, it's important to educate
yeah.
also customers to this new perspective, so that sustainability can become something more
Yeah,
normal
because
and accepted.
yeah, I think because if you give a customer an option to buy a chair that's made out of plastic or buy a chair that's made out of a sustainable material at the same price, so the looks the same, functions the same way, obviously the customer will choose a sustainable option. So I think it is that's the responsibility we have to kind of own and give that option to the customer.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so my last question, because unfortunately we are almost at the end of our time already, would be what are your next steps then? So, as you said that you are going to, you know, that your general, yeah, your general mission is working with the resources that you can find around you. What are your
Yeah.
next steps on your sustainability journey?
I think I would like to start with kids and educate small children and young adults about this. And at least with this project, I would like to have these products in schools or places where kids can interact with it, so that as they're growing up, if somebody tells you about a certain thing, it kind of builds with you and you carry that forward. So I think that's a really interesting space for me, for me to explore. And that's why I think I'm also looking at playful tables and like more things that kids can interact with. And that's something that's really close to my heart. So that would be one side of the journey for me. And the
Yeah,
other one, of course, is to have these products in homes and like tiles or homeware products, tableware products, furniture, of course. So these are definitely big goals for me ahead.
yeah. So these materials again could be also used as tableware, you said?
Not to use
Oh,
as to eat from off of
yeah,
it right now, but that's also something that can be looked into the future. But these are things that you can still have as tabletops or trays and things that don't get in contact with food at the moment.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, okay. Yeah, because otherwise you would need to coat them, right?
yeah,
You would
yeah.
need time to find a sustainable coating, you know, when
Yeah, that's again a huge challenge to find. So, so then there'll be a whole different process or something else that needs to go along with this to kind of avoid the use of a resin or something like that.
Okay, yeah, yeah, makes sense. All right. How are we already at the end of it? I mean, time flies. Okay.
It feels like we just started.
Sorry?
It feels like we just started.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I could go on for hours, but anyways, so thank you so much for having been with me. It's been a super interesting conversation. Good luck for the future, because your project is absolutely, it's also very, it brings a breath of hope, I believe, because in such a challenging time, to see that this project has come out of this challenging time is really inspiring for everyone, because I think that really from challenging time we can get a lot of learning. It's also an opportunity, but then we have to have the right mindset to get those opportunity and to stay.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
to,
for having me. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so
my
much.
pleasure, Rashmi. Thanks to everyone who has been with us, and I will see you in the next episode of Sustainable Innovation for Interiors. And for the time being, goodbye. And bye, Rashmi.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.